What's up, everybody? Welcome to For Yogz episode 9. On this week's show, we're going to be giving you an extensive breakdown on UFC 251 from Abu Dhabi. We're going to get into some of the storylines of the fight card and give you our picks. Sufyan, we're back, brother.
Back, man. I back. As the famous line from Anderson Silva. I back.
I'm back. Bro, it feels good to be on fight week, doesn't it? There's nothing better than these big cards, the beginning of the week, the embedded start coming out, feel those familiar feelings coming back. I love it.
Yeah, it's been really good, man. And then the UFC's been quite consistent with, despite the fact that, there's no fan-filled arenas, the UFC's been really quite consistent with their cards. Near enough every week there's a fight card, but you're right. There's nothing quite like a big pay-per-view event, and especially one with 3 title fights, which you rarely see. This one looks really exciting, and I'm really amped to break that down with you today.
Absolutely, man. And before we get into the meat of the card, I just want to obviously touch on a few things happening in the wider MMA world. Woke up to very sad news this morning that Khabib Nurmagomedov's father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, has passed away. He'd been in struggle with COVID-related symptoms for some time, and it seems as though, unfortunately, he's lost his battle with the virus that's causing suffering to so many people. The relationship between Khabib and his father is well documented. And he's been a staple in his son's development. Going back to childhood, he was his first coach. And thoughts go out to Khabib and his family. Souph, do you foresee this affecting Khabib's desire to come back to the sport?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I mean, I echo that. My thoughts and condolences to Khabib and his family for their loss. It's also a loss for mixed martial arts as well as a whole, because many people today consider Khabib Nurmagomedov to be one of the best fighters to ever lace up and step inside the octagon, and he will himself attest to being a product directly of his father's making. Well, obviously, yes, he's his father's son, but he trained him up, put them in there in the ring with bears as well, and all sorts, and created this absolute monster that's Khabib Nurmagomedov. Yeah, it's Khabib has already kind of hinted at potentially retiring from the sport or not having many fights left on the horizon. And you do wonder something like this, where so much of your motivations came out of, I'm sure a lot of his, he's really, to make his father proud is probably a big thing for him. So with that now gone, or, not necessarily it could necessarily be in a sort of metaphorical sense, but you do wonder how that might affect his motivations going forward to step back in there and defend his title.
Absolutely. And, at a time like this, I know the last thing on Khabib's mind will be fighting. So I don't want to push that to the forefront as the most important thing to come out of this. So I hope he takes the necessary time to grieve and get over this loss, and whatever happens with his career going forward, I hope he can bounce back. We came off a couple of cards that we didn't really delve into too much, right? We spoke about 250, and that was great. But there's a couple of cards that we didn't really get into too much on the show. I mean, last weekend we saw Fight of the Year contender. One Dan Hooker took on Dustin Poirier in a 5-round main eventer at 155. And it had social media a buzz, didn't it, Souph?
Yeah, that fight was a spectacular show of determination and grit from both guys. That second round was so back and forth. It was absolutely crazy. Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier left absolutely everything in there. It was again a testament to why the lightweight division is the most, I think he is quite clearly this most talent-stacked division, not only in the UFC, but in all organizations. It's very talent-rich. The guys from 1 to 10, any number of them could be a potential champion. Yeah, it was a fantastic fight.
So a few things for me on that fight, right? First of all, Dustin Poirier is such an interesting figure in the sport. Back earlier in his career, on his rise up the ranks to 145, he took a couple setbacks, the McGregor fight, the Michael Johnson fight, and it seemed like maybe he was going to be striving for something that he couldn't attain. In the last 5 years, in the last four or 5 years, he has become a fan favorite with his fight style. Big fights against Alvarez, Gaethje, obviously the title shot against Khabib. I can't put my finger on what he does well, Souph, right? Because he's got good boxing, but he also gets hit. He's got good wrestling, but he can also be taken down, right, by people who are not as credentialed, for example, Dan Hooker, who's not a credentialed wrestler, for example, right? And I was thinking about the Max Holloway fight, I was thinking about this fight, and what he possesses is this grit and this ability to withstand more than the other man. When he hits people, he's not knocking them out in one punch, but it's the damage that his punches take that other fighters don't have. It's a weird sort of power. You saw it against Max, you saw it against Dan Hooker, and you saw it against Gaethje. It's like this sort of, you see their health bar being chipped away every time, right? Poirier's got a strange stopping power to his punches, right? He might not be knocking his opponents out, but he slows them down, he cuts them up, he bruises them up, and he damages them. And I feel like that, combined with his ability to withstand, is just what's getting him through a lot of these fights at this point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on both of them. So, I mean, Dan Hooker, firstly, I mean, he walks away from the fight, obviously not winning. He had really good success, I'd say, in the first 3 rounds, and then it kind of started to fade. And as you pointed out quite rightly, Dustin Poirier was, the athlete that has shown more grit and potential to sort of walk through punishment and survive in those later championship rounds. But Dan Hooker definitely showed that he deserves a seat at the big boy table. Looked very impressive early on. He's still young in his career, and although he has taken his last 2 fights, he's taken a tremendous amount of punishment. So I would like to see him to kind of like take a bit of a respite, develop, and then maybe again challenge again for that sort of top five slot. Dustin Poirier, I agree with you, but I have seen a lot of Dustin Poirier has developed a lot since he reminds me of the Michael Bisping of the lightweight division, because again, Michael Bisping obviously achieved championship success and he held the actual, the full middleweight title, which Dustin Poirier has only held the interim title. But it's this, he has this grit, and he does everything well. He doesn't have any glaring weaknesses. Much like Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping was a very workman-like style. Dustin Poirier, I think, is a bit slicker, but yeah, he has wins over former champions and he has wins over title contenders as well. So I think he's right there. I think Khabib is just a terrible matchup for anybody at that division, and losing to the people that he's lost to in the lightweight division, there's absolutely no shame in it. So yeah, I mean that's what I'd think. I mean, I would love to see now Dustin Poirier fight Tony Ferguson. I think that fight makes all the sense in the world. That should be his next fight.
Absolutely.
And I think that will show a lot about where Tony Ferguson is in his career. And if Dustin Poirier is able to defeat Tony Ferguson, similarly into the way he beat Hooker, I mean, that would definitely that would make me excited enough to see him again challenge for a belt.
Definitely. I think the landscape at 155 is such that there's so many potential great matchups, right? And I mean, with Conor in the mix as well, Tony. Yeah, I would love to see Dustin take on Tony. That is one for the fans, and I feel like the winner of that would almost certainly be right back in contention for a title shot. Off the back of that, right? The social media, like I said, was a buzz about the fight. A lot of people called it Fight of the Year candidate. A lot of people saying it was Fight of the Year. So I'll be honest with you, right? I thought it was a great fight. For me, Weili Zhang versus Joanna at the start of the year before COVID was the Fight of the Year for me so far. I loved that fight. And my reason for that is I felt that at parts, the Hooker Poirier fight just got a little bit too scrappy, a little bit too wild, right? I felt like the aforementioned strawweight title fight remained composed and it remained sort of clinical the whole way through, and I felt like they also had the exciting elements to it too. So
no, I completely agree with you. I think yeah, this was a contender, and a lot of people are calling this the fight of the year already. We've had such crazy fights this year, and it's we're already just over halfway through the year. I still put Weili Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk as the number 1 fight of the year pick so far. Because firstly, yeah, it was absolutely sensational fight. Both women were able to put their everything on the line up until the final buzzer. That fight was competitive up until end of round 5, which is something I don't think the Poirier and Hooker fight had. It kind of started to fade a bit for Hooker there toward rounds 4 and 5. I think Poirier kind of led the way with that. And Joanna Jędrzejczyk, I mean, her head, her face, she didn't even look human anymore. She put herself through absolute destruction in order to hear the final buzzer, and for that, that for me, that's fight of the year. Until something absolutely insane is going to have to happen in order for that to be topped.
All right, so at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, Dana White was very defiant about the idea of getting back to action for the sport, right? And very early on, he floated the idea of a Fight Island, right?
Fight
Buying
Island, yeah.
And, the chin started wagging. People were talking, is this real? Is it not real? Where's it going to be? And some 4 months later, we have now got what is in essence Fight Island, right? And it's not in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but it is Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, which I'm not mad at. At the end of the day, it took a lot to get that done. And as long as the fighters can fight safely, I don't mind. So from what I understand, they're going to be doing 4 cards out there.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Yeah, I think so.
So after all of that discussion and that back and forth is finally happening, and they're starting this run of Abu Dhabi fight cards off with an absolute bang. 3 title fights, and 251 is looking stacked. So I was looking at the card and it's weird. I got a strange sense of deja vu. And I think the reason is, if you look at the card, it's interesting, right? The last time we saw Usman, the last time we saw Aldo, the last time we saw Holloway, Volkanovski, and Peter Yan, they were all on the same card, 245 in December. So these fighters all fought on the same card last time out, which I thought was quite interesting. It creates a bit of an interesting dynamic.
No, I agree. Yeah, I mean that is definitely something worthy of note. The fact that a lot of them, apart from memory, would be Gilbert Burns. There would have been a similar sort of timeline where they've last fought. So Gilbert Burns has been the bit more active one out of the bunch in the main events.
So they're leading off with 3 title fights. So the incentive for doing this card in Abu Dhabi was to give non-US based fighters the opportunity to fight, right? Because obviously due to border restrictions, a lot of fighters couldn't travel. So this is a great way for those fighters to fight outside of the US. And starting from the main card, we're going to start at the bottom. A man, Paige Van Zandt. This is an interesting one, right? So because I think Paige Van Zandt is a divisive character in the sport. I think a lot of people love her. A lot of people hate on her. I think that'd be fair to say, right?
Yeah, she was a bit of the sort of early on. She was a bit of a UFC sweetheart. Everyone kind of loved her and was, wishing her success. But I think as she started to garner a bit more of that notoriety and all that, it's kind of changed a little bit. I think some of her comments recently about, fighter pay and how much money she gets outside of the UFC for appearances and stuff like that. It's just, she's talking about fighting in a very, I'm not entirely sure. No, I don't want to say grateful because, I'm sure she's almost certainly worth a lot more money than she's currently being compensated. I think we can all agree on that. But at the same time, she wouldn't have had the success or the opportunities that she's been given if not for the exposure that the UFC gave her. So it's an interesting one. I think a lot of the story around Paige Van Zandt recently has been free agency and her wanting to test the market and get what she's worth.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's always difficult when a fighter is perceived to be pushed more than they deserve, right? And I think we saw that with Paige, we saw that with Sage, Northcutt similarly, and it tends to lead to a lot of dislike amongst the fan base. And for Paige Van Zandt as a I guess conventionally attractive female, there's always going to be those questions and those remarks. Going into free agency, I love it. I think I'd always advocate for that in any industry, right? The employee's ability to choose where they work is important, and it's good for competition. It seems almost certain that she's going to leave the UFC at this point, right?
Yeah, I think the relationship with her and the UFC brass is well documented in that it's not very good. And I think tensions are high. She doesn't feel like she's been given what she's valued. And I think somewhere like Bellator, Scott Coker, he's going to absolutely snap at the opportunity to get a young star with a lot of potential like Paige Van Zandt that he can push in the right way. Because like you mentioned earlier, she was kind of fast tracked. And one thing that Bellator are really good at doing is building up a star and giving them the right matchups in order to build that star. UFC obviously
Aaron
a bigger
Aaron Pico.
That was a bit the wheels fell off on that one. But yeah, so I'd say for the most part they're very good at it. But Aaron Pico kind of, I think he seems to be on the right track now.
For what it's worth, sorry, I wasn't a jab at him. I big Aaron Pico fan. I think he's got a huge upside, but I just thought some of the matchups they gave him, who could have foreseen some of the defeats he had? But anyway, sidebar. Wasn't a Aaron Pico.
No, you're right. For the most part, I would say the Bellator promotional machine are a bit better at sort of pushing stars and giving them the right matchups. When in the UFC, because it's so talent rich, very quickly, it's almost they don't have necessarily, because it's such a big machine, they don't necessarily have the time to slowly engineer a pathway for a fighter in order to achieve success. And before you know it, they're in the top 10 and it's full of killers. Whereas in Bellator, you can kind of get away with fighting a few tomato cans and then slowly working your way up. So yeah, I think someone like Paige VanZant might actually benefit from a move to another agency like Bellator or One or something like that.
All of that to say, she's been faced off against Amanda Ribas, who is a up and coming female fighter. She's 3-0 in the UFC. Who's also has an upside to herself, right? I mean,
she's down to scrap.
She is.
She's done. She's about business. When she gets in there,
she's about business. Shout out Adrian Broner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she. I've watched some of her fights earlier this week, and her fight with Dern, she's absolutely just very vicious and very nasty. I think is what I'm noticing. She's quite nasty with some of the techniques that she uses.
I agree.
Which I like. I like to see.
When I see female fighters with that edge, I like them more, right? Because I think sometimes, if there is one criticism to be leveled at women's MMA, not by me, but some people who are haters, they would say that there's not enough finishes, there's not enough of the sort of just bleed mentality almost.
Yeah.
But when you see a female fighter who has that venom, it's a bit of an eye opener. And if there's one thing that kind of strikes me about this matchup is that Paige VanZant, being where she's at in her career, making the transition out of the UFC and maybe one foot already out the door of fighting. So I was actually going to say she's not someone who's known for being resilient, but actually Paige is a tough cookie, man. I think I was
going to say she is, man. Like her fight with Rose Namajunas, that sticks out in my head as she was in, like, I can't remember how many submission attempts that Rose had before she finally got the choke.
Yeah,
she was in all sorts. She was in arm bars, chokes. Her face was all bloody, and she's a few times she's had to kind of come round the back. I remember her UFC debut against Kailin Curran. That was a really tough fight, but she managed to come back. Even most recently, a fight with Rachel Ostovich. That first round, she's been completely dominated, and then she comes back quickly. A turn of a. Just a quick sweep a quick reversal into a back take ended the fight. I think it would be unfair to characterize this as a kind of nasty fighter against someone who's prim and proper, and she's thinks a lot highly of herself, and she's not necessarily willing to put herself in harm's way. I think Paige VanZant is down to scrap as well. But I do wonder about her motivations at the moment. That's the only thing I would maybe suggest. But don't get it twisted. She's AB as you say, about business as well.
She fought with a broken arm as well. I'm trying to remember which fight that was, but she broke her arm during the fight, didn't she?
Yeah, against was it not Australian? What was her name?
Beck Rawlins, Rowdy Beck.
No, it wasn't Beck Rawlins. It was another woman.
Jessica Rose Clark.
That's it. Jessica Rose Clark.
Yeah. So definitely she can take punishment, and she can hang on in there, and she can survive when she's hurt, and she'll put herself, there's no quit in her. That might be to her detriment against someone like Ribas, who, like you said, does like to get down and dirty. Yeah, so Amanda Ribas, is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, judo black belt. She's fought Mackenzie Dern, who is the best submission grappler in women's MMA. I would say pretty much
easily.
Yeah. And she really had no problems hanging on, in the grappling department, which doesn't bode well for Paige, right? Because I think Paige got a couple submission wins, and I mean that might be what she might normally try to do. I think this is a great opportunity for her, right? She's fighting someone with a huge reputation in the UFC, and I think we're going to see Amanda Ribas come out and really try to seize and capitalize on that opportunity. Huge pay-per-view card, huge opponent, and I just think that it's going to be a real coming out party for her.
Is that your pick then? Yeah, is that your pick, Amanda Ribas? Yeah.
Oh well, if you want to get into picks, if you want to get into picks now, then we can. I mean,
no, I've got a lot riding on this. I've got my reputation. You're like a few. Well, I say a few. You're quite a few points up. So I need to get that. I need to get that spot back. That number one spot.
You do, man. And I didn't want to say anything, but I do feel like some of the reasons why we didn't do a breakdown card was because you were still reeling from defeat. I think you had to take time out to emotionally recover from the embarrassing defeat.
No, I've been in the lab. That's where I've been. I've been in the lab. So what is it? You reckon Hebas?
I do, Sophie. I think Amanda Hebas is going to come out, and I actually think she's going to obliterate Paige Van Zandt. I think this is one of those situations where, you know, one fighter's sort of got an eye out of the door or a foot out of the door, and that's never a good place to be. And I think because Amanda Hebas is on the rise in her career and trying to make a name for herself, it's clever matchmaking by the UFC. I think she's going to go out there and I think she's going to blow Paige Van Zandt away. I think she's going to win by TKO in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Amanda Hebas is going to walk away with the win. I think she's, you know, kind of question Paige Van Zandt's, you know, where she is in her career. So yeah, I've got Amanda Hebas by win. I'm going to say by TKO third round.
Nice. Okay, so I see you're really pushing the boat out there on the pick, Souph. Cool.
Okay, so next up we have another female bout, and this is actually a rematch that was previously a championship fight, and that is Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade 2. So this fight's super interesting. As I said, first fight was for the title. Jessica Andrade won the title and got absolutely murked by Zhang Weili. And this is her next fight. So Rose hasn't fought anybody since that fight with Jessica Andrade because she kind of had I guess you can call it a bit of a sabbatical. She was dealing with some, I think 2 of her family members had actually passed away due to COVID, and she was dealing with some kind of reservations about fighting, or not really, you know, not really knowing if her heart was in it anymore, or she had the right motivations. Since then, she's found those motivations, and she wanted to fight Jessica Andrade for the rematch. The first fight, I mean, if you haven't watched it, I'm sure it's available on YouTube, ended in Rose was kind of dominating. I was quite fair to say she was kind of dominating the fight up until when she wasn't, when she was unconscious. So she you know, she goes for I think it's happening actually in the first round as well. So she was kind of semi-slammed by Andrade, which Michael Goldberg always says her nickname is the pile driver. He always used to call her, but I think that name is very apt because she absolutely pile drived Rose Namajunas into the UFC canvas and sent her into oblivion, and took the UFC title as well. So this is a rematch. You obviously, Lewis, you mentioned to me that you were a bit of a I guess a clairvoyant, and you saw that, you know, being the result. And I wonder, what's your kind of take on the rematch? How do you see it going?
You know, for me, Andrade was one of those fighters that I'd always kind of watched and enjoyed her sort of the aggression that she put forth in the fight. And, you know, I will post this on the Instagram page. I did call the first fight ending by TKO slam. I don't want any credit for it, but, you know.
Some likes would be all right, though.
Some likes and shares, yeah. But no, seriously, the ending to the last fight was absolutely emphatic. But I actually think you're underselling how dominant Rose looked in that first round. And I sometimes I hate it when, like, you know, a fighter looks good in the first round, they end up losing the fight. I was like, oh, they look great in the first. She looked phenomenal, Souph, right?
She looked crazy. She was piecing her up.
Yeah,
she was piecing Andrade up easily.
She really was. And what Rose did in that first round highlighted all of the shortcomings that I see of Andrade, right? I think Andrade has a lot of technical deficiencies, right? And you know, again, I don't want to sound like an asshole. Who am I to say that this elite fighter has technical deficiencies? Used her body type to her advantage in her fights. The problem with Andrade is that closing the distance is very difficult for her, right? She'll drop her head, she'll charge forward, and she'll swing looping shots to try and get inside. And I mean, it has worked for her. We've seen her with absolute one-punch KO power. She slept Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
Oh, yeah. Nasty one.
Absolutely ended her, right? But that required a static opponent. That required someone to stand there and not, you know, cut angles and not move. What we saw against Joanna Jędrzejczyk and the first round against Rose, if an opponent is cutting angles and using footwork and sticking and moving with the jab, she doesn't really have the capacity to deal with that. She'll take a lot of shots. Even just to get inside, she's going to take a lot of shots, right? So that was the first thing that struck me. That first fight, those deficiencies all came out. Now, of course, Andrade likes to get in close, likes to throw big shots, and also likes to get a hold of her opponent and slam. You know, she uses the slam. Like you said, her nickname is the pile driver. That's a part of her game. But that requires Andrade to back her opponent up to the cage, right? It requires her to back them up behind the black lines, get them to the cage, right? And I think Rose fell victim to that in the first round, but she, used the Kimura trap to kind of avoid getting too badly hurt. And in the second round, she wasn't able to, and she got put to sleep. I think if Rose can avoid that this time, avoid getting backed up to the cage, and just stick to the game that she brought in the first fight, I don't see Rose losing the fight, especially over 3 rounds when she can exert more energy with her footwork, more energy for her movement, and stay fresh throughout the fight. So if I don't know if you mentioned Andrade's fight against Weili Zhang. A huge hole in Andrade's game is her posture. Right, like I said, she comes forward, she drops her head, right? But what happens is she's so susceptible to the clinch because of that. And if you saw the Weili Zhang fight, I think the beginning of the end, I mean, it was a 40-second fight essentially, but it was a clinch from the knee. She ate, right? And also in the first fight between these two, Rose dropped her with a clinch knee as well, right? It was in transition. Huge hole in Andrade's game, and she hasn't addressed it. She hasn't addressed that she drops her head, and against someone who can, with more range on her, who can use the tie clinch, pull that head down and land the knees to the body and the head. I just see that being, again, more of the same. I know I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but I'm so excited about this fight because what I saw from Rose in the first round, I was honestly so impressed by what she was doing. And I actually felt like we got robbed almost of a really interesting fight, the way it ended. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Andrade. Yeah, Souph, before we get to our picks, give me your input. Give me your input on this fight.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I think I did kind of undersell how dominant she was in that fight. Rose Namajunas looked absolutely phenomenal in that first round. She came out, she followed the game plan that was laid out by Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her first fight with Andrade, which was stick and move, straight strikes down the middle, up the middle, and that's what's going to give Andrade problem. Excellent footwork, making sure you keep in range, and Rose seemed to be doing that to a T. She the Kimura trap is a powerful weapon, and that was kind of shown in the first round of that fight. I mean, Andrade basically went for the slam from the Kimura trap. And Rose was able to maneuver her body in order to kind of make sure that her hips and her feet were the first thing that impacted on the mat, and not her brain. So, and then straight away, what happens? She goes straight into an armbar, and Andrade was kind of like in a bit of trouble there. And I think Andrade did I want to give her a bit of credit because on the second attempt, she had her head. On the first attempt, she had her head on the inside. And then on the second attempt, she removed her head and put it on the outside, so she was able to maneuver Rose much more easier and slam her straight away and not give her a chance to kind of move her body and adjust her body. So that was an excellent adjustment by Andrade, and I want to give her credit for that. However, I think Rose, as long as she can avoid that and not hold on to submissions where she knows that obviously there's a threat there now, I think like you, I see her coming back. She says she's found a new motivation for the sport, and I think she'll come back and definitely show that. Because you're right, that first round, that first moments of that fight, she looked like an animal. Oh, when I saw that, I was like, who's going to stop this girl? Like she looked phenomenal. She was doing everything right. Again, under the tutelage of Trevor Whitman, who's a genius. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's one of these weird fights because Rose was she was doing everything right. She wasn't actually doing anything wrong. It wasn't like she could point to things that she was doing wrong in the fight, like, oh, I could have been doing this, oh, I could have been doing that. I'm sure there are things that, she can, in terms of her footwork to avoid the kind of clinch situations, if that's what she really wants to do, like to completely no-sell it. Looking at the fight, it was pretty much perfect until the slam. So yeah, that's my input. I'm really excited for this fight. This is a great, and you're right with the 3 rounds as well. I wonder how that's going to impact the fight as well.
Yeah, I mean, Andrade isn't known for her endurance, so she's definitely a power athlete. And I think we've seen Rose go 5 rounds comfortably against JJ in high intensity fights. So yeah, I am ready to make my my bold picks on this fight. Do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, okay, I'll go first.
You
Okay,
go? You go?
You go? Okay. For me, I'm having a hard time deciding whether or not Rose is going to be able to finish Andrade. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Rose defeats Andrade by second round TKO.
Wow. You took my pick. You took my pick.
They took our picks.
Taking my breakdown into account and the holes that I see in Andrade's game, I expect Namajunas to get back to what she did in the first fight, start inflicting damage with the jab early on. I see Andrade getting desperate as the fight goes on, and those defensive frailties to really come out. So I'm going to go for Rose Namajunas by third round KO TKO. I expect the knees to play a big part in this, and I think the punch that finishes is going to be a left hook, the same one she dropped JJ with. How about that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean the left hook was definitely something she was working in the first fight. So yeah, I see that being a big weapon for her as well. Okay, awesome pick. Okay, cool.
Nice. Next up is a very intriguing matchup between Petr Yan and Jose Aldo. This fight is for the vacant bantamweight title, which was recently vacated by one Henry Cejudo, and has obviously left a void at the top of the division. Now, the fact that this fight is even taking place is a little controversial, as you know, Aldo, you know, as much of a legend as he was at 145, he's come down to 135, and you know, he lost his debut against Marlon Moraes. He was still given a title shot, which you know had weights up the wrong way. But the hype behind Petr Yan is pretty incredible, right? He has kind of taken the 135 division by storm. He's 6-0 in UFC. His most recent fight was a knockout over Uriah Faber, where he looked incredible, right? Going into this fight, it's hard to know where Aldo is, right? We've seen he's lost 5 of his last 8 fights. And I mean, obviously he's fighting great competition, but it's hard to know where he is at in his career, especially at a new weight class. Conversely, Petr Yan is kind of the hot new young thing in the division, and has showed some excellent boxing credentials, especially. Sufyan, how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, so kind of controversial, this matchup. I mean, I think no one could really argue for Petr Yan having the title fight, but then again, as you say, Aldo, he did lose against Marlon Moraes, although it was a very controversial decision. A lot of people thought that actually he won that fight, but he didn't. So giving him a title fight off the back of a loss is a bit, you know, obviously controversial. However, this fight is really intriguing to me. When I look at Jose Aldo and the way he looked in that Marlon Moraes fight, Marlon Moraes, who's one of the bigger bantamweights, Aldo was walking him down, you know, pressuring him. It was crazy to see kind of three round Aldo, who was like blasting him with his excellent boxing techniques and picking Marlon apart. And he had really good cardio as well. He started off slow, but then he kind of picked up in rounds 2 and 3, which is a really good sign for Petr Yan. Like you say, I mean, everyone's hot on him, and I think with good reason. But at the same time, I look at who he's fought and his last 3 fights: John Dodson, Jimmy Rivera, and Uriah Faber. Now, I think the Jimmy Rivera fight was a very close fight, and actually it was a unanimous decision. But actually, Jimmy Rivera outlanded Petr Yan in that fight, which is interesting. I think even that was quite a controversial decision to some people. And his fight with Uriah Faber, yeah, of course, like he smoked Uriah Faber with a head kick out of a clinch, and he looked phenomenal in that fight. I think what he does really well is he's a pressure fighter. But he puts pressure in a way that he doesn't really do a lot. Like he's very front heavy on his lead foot. He's got high guard, and he slowly moves towards the opponent, and the opponent kind of feints and kind of trying to figure out his opponent. But he doesn't actually do a lot, which kind of, and he trying to draws out the attacks of the opponent, and that kind of like you saw that in the early on with the Uriah Faber fight. Uriah Faber didn't know what to do. He was just giving these big tells, like big reads to Peter Yan, it was like if there was a little feint or a little feint of a kick, you know, Uriah would be, you know, ducking his head, moving his head. He was, you know, really jittery and had a lot of nervous energy. And I think Peter Yan kind of does that with his style. He's very good at edging forward and counter fighting. He's a bit of a headhunter. The vast majority of his strikes are you know, for the head. And I think Aldo is slightly a bit more mixed in terms of his body head attack. Also, as well, one thing that I would really have liked to have seen in Aldo's last fight was for him to go back to the leg, because there's been a lot of conspiracy theories out there as to why Aldo's kind of moved away from that leg kick heavy game. A lot of people have speculated that it's perhaps an injury that he has, or that he's kind of changed his style up, he's fallen in love with his hands a bit, and he's kind of moved away from the kicking game. But I think that would be something that would benefit Aldo quite a lot in this matchup, because of how Peter Yan's actually he leads quite heavy on that lead leg. But yeah, I mean, the fight for me is fantastic. I'm really looking forward to when these two get in there and touch gloves.
Yeah, I love the breakdown, Souph. Very intelligent, very well-informed analysis of this matchup. When there's a fighter that comes into the UFC who goes on a win streak, and you start seeing 4-5-0, 6-0, it's very easy to get swept up in that. And what I have to remind people is, look at who they fought. The reason you didn't hear about them when they were 3-0 is because they were fighting people you'd never heard of. Sometimes fighters fly under the radar because of that. With Peter Yan, I do look at his record. I do look at who he's fought. It's hard to know, you know, the people he's fighting. Uriah Faber at 40 years old, is he the best matchup possible? Is John Dodson, who's notoriously a up and down fighter? The Rivera fight, I think Yan was a bit more dominant than you're selling it, but I agree, it wasn't, you know, Rivera's, you know, up there top 6 in the division. I'm one of those people who might have got swept up in the Peter Yan hype, right? There's something about him. He's got an air of invincibility because he's got that, you know, his English isn't great, but when he does speak, he's very sarcastic. He talks shit during fights. He's got a sort of swagger about him, which is very likable. And conversely, I think Aldo is someone who I've come to almost discount unnecessarily. You look at Aldo's record, like I said, lost 5 of his last 8. Well, you know, okay, he lost to Conor McGregor, he lost to Max Holloway twice. He lost to Volkanovski. All champions. And then the Moraes fight, you know, okay, it was controversial, whatever. But you know, he's fighting the elite competition. And you know, when he's taken a step down to fight Stevens and to fight
Moicano,
he's starching them. And you say he fell in love with the hands, but the body shots that man was throwing in those fights. So I say all of that to say that I think maybe I'm guilty of doing what a lot of people have done, and that is rule Aldo out prematurely. I do think he's got a lot left in his career. I'm skeptical of 135 because whenever you see a fighter go down in weight, it's, you know, towards the tail end of their career, you start thinking this is like, you know, a big risk, or can their body do it? But he made the weight. He made 3 rounds against Moraes. The absence of Jose Aldo's leg kicks is like, you know, a long fabled thing in MMA at this point, right? When is he bringing it back? When's he doing it? You know, we saw what he did to, I think, in the Mendes fight and the Uriah Faber fights. He absolutely obliterated that lead leg with the kicks, right? It's so important to remember that he has that in his arsenal. Now, what you said about Peter Yan and his kind of boxing-centric style being heavy in the lead leg, totally agree. This would be the perfect opportunity for those Aldo leg kicks to come back. And I think, you know, it'd be a great game plan to help slow that movement and to really chew up that front leg. So when this matchup was made, I was like, yeah, of course Peter Yan's going to win, right? And I think that's me getting swept up in the hype. Thinking more intelligently about the fight and thinking about the matchup and the credentials of each fighter, you know, I've started to see it differently. And it's a 5-round fight. Peter Yan hasn't gone 5 rounds. Aldo has done nothing but go 5 rounds or be in 5-round fights. He's intelligent. He knows the game. He knows how to find ways to win. So I say all that to say,
what's your pick, big boy? Sign the contract.
I'm ready to go out on the limb, Souph. I think this one goes the distance. And I think we see a situation where Yan's going to come out aggressively. And I think Aldo is going to chip away at that confidence through the middle rounds. I think he's going to slow Yan's movement. And I think we're going to see a more reluctant Yan as the fight goes on. I think it's going to go 5 rounds. I think Aldo is going to edge him by decision. And I think we're going to, crazily enough, be saying that Jose Aldo is a new bantamweight champion.
I know we seem to be agreeing a lot on these matchups, which is quite interesting.
You're fucking smart.
You're right. I think a lot of people kind of poo-pooed Jose Aldo's chances of at a bantamweight title particularly when it was first announced that he potentially was going to be fighting Henry Cejudo. A lot of people were like, that's just not a good idea. But his kind of how he looked against Marlon Moraes has given me a lot of promise. And I think he'd actually do quite well. And people forget Jose Aldo's 33 years old. I know he's like 100 years old in fight years, but in real years he's only 33. And again, Peter Yan is 27. Obviously, he's a bit more of a spring chicken, and only fresh blood in the division. But it's interesting. For me, my pick, I agree with you. I think the power is going to be a bit too much for Peter Yan from Jose Aldo, who hits like an absolute Mack truck at the bantamweight division. And I think Peter Yan's going to try his normal game of kind of, waiting on the outside, trying to force some movement out of Aldo. I think what he's going to like coming out of the back of that with some of the power that Aldo is has in his hands. I don't think he's going to like it. And I think that's going to make him a bit cautious as the fight goes on. So my pick is a Jose Aldo to win. I don't want to appear to be a copycat, but I think he's going to win a decision as well.
What round?
A decision in round one.
Round one decision.
Round decision.
No, I like it. So if I like it, I think we're aligned because we see these things. So yeah, I agree, man. It's interesting what you say about the age, right? The age of fighters is something that gets, the way it's perceived is so different. Jose Aldo is seen as this old man, right? He's 33. Gilbert Burns is seen as this young up and comer, and he's also 33, right?
Crazy. It's crazy, isn't it? It's because Aldo's been around for donkey's years, but he was around, for the WC. He was a champion in the WC. The amount of mileage this guy's had on his career it's crazy, and I think that's just a testament to his set of skills that he has.
And I mean, coming off the fight card we recently had, where the bantamweights were on show, this is just so good for the division. I mean, for example, if Aldo did win the belt, it sets up some huge matchups going forward for the rest of the division. We'd probably see Aljamain Sterling facing Aldo. So who knows? But
this fight card's awesome. We're not even. We've still got 2 more fights left to break down. The next one, which is another championship fight, and is another one, and a rematch as well. Another rematch is Volkanovski versus Holloway 2. This one is another great matchup as well, and I'm really excited to break this down with you, Lewis. Obviously, the first fight was quite was competitive, and Holloway did lose his UFC featherweight title. Volkanovski, this is his first title defense. There hasn't been a whole lot of time between their last fight, and they haven't fought anybody else since. So normally when that happens, it doesn't fare well for the person who lost the first fight. But Max Holloway is one of those fighters that has a very modular game, and he's able to kind of adapt to his opponents, and he gets better as the fight goes on, which was kind of evident in the last fight with Volkanovski. How do you see this fight going down, Lewis, between the two?
This was a really interesting one for me. Souph. I am a huge Max Holloway fan, right? I love his persona outside the cage. I love his fight style in the cage. I've got a Max Holloway Reebok t-shirt. That's how real I keep it, right?
I love his haircut as well. You see his haircut?
I love his hair. If you see, even my hair is looking like his hair right now. That's how much I'm a Max Holloway fan. I've grown. I love him. He's a great personality. He's great for the sport, and he's a great fighter. And we've seen, the evolution of this guy over the years. 2019 was a rough year for him, right? Obviously, he had the defense against Frankie Edgar, but he also, had the failed bid to go up to 155 against Poirier, and then obviously lost his belt back in December. First fight they had at 245. I was watching it on holiday. I was in Istanbul, right? And I was watching the fight, and I was anxious and I was nervous, and it was early in the morning, and I was rooting for Holloway. And it's funny what your emotions can do to you when you're watching a fight, because you can watch a fight and the guy that you want to win, and you'll tell yourself it's a lot closer than it is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what happened in this fight.
I agree. Yeah.
I watched it and I was like, it's competitive till the end. I watched the fight back again this week ahead of the show, and it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close, right? I mean, and initially I thought, maybe Max took round 4 and maybe took 5. No, it was a shutout. It was a shutout. The just obviously was well publicized, the number of leg kicks that were thrown and landed by Volkanovski. It just disrupted Max's rhythm, right? Holloway is a volume fighter. He likes to slow cook his opponents. That style requires, inherently requires you to be advancing on your opponent. Now, with the leg kicks, he was constantly getting backed up. It was disrupting his rhythm. He couldn't advance and put forward the pressure. it was a great strategy by Volkanovski, and it just completely took Max out of his game. In the rare occasions when Max actually did advance, he did have success in the fight, right? He managed to land on Volkanovski. You know, he's obviously the much taller opponent, has a good reach. Is there a more underrated or underappreciated champion in the UFC than Alex Volkanovski?
Oh well, yeah, I think at the moment he's definitely up there in terms of underappreciated, and he comes out of the guys down in New Zealand. He splits the coaching, between Eugene Behrman of City Kickboxing and his coach that's based in Australia. And he has this. I think at the beginning he was kind of labelled as this kind of brawler, you know, this kind of walk forward, you know, hits very hard, and I think he kind of self-identifies as that. He kind of, you know, talked about his previous career as athletic career as a rugby player, and the fact that he used to weigh, you know, 200 plus pounds.
It depends who you ask. If you asked Joe Rogan, it was 487 pounds.
Yeah, if you asked Joe Rogan, he weighed the equivalent of a whale. And then if you ask anybody else, he weighed, you know, he was just he weighed somewhere in this sort of region that, you know, that I weigh. But yeah, he which is almost equivalent to a whale as well. But anyway, he
Corona 20.
Yeah, but it's where it kind of turned for him, at least for me anyway, was the Jose Aldo fight. So when he fought against Jose Aldo, and he was, you know, he showed his kind of growth in terms of like the kind of the defensive responsibility and the kind of, you know, mixing up of takedowns, leg kicks, striking, being defensively responsible, exiting the pocket, and doing all that stuff that you know the City Kickboxing guys are kind of known for at the moment. It was I was very interested to see how he was going to match up with Max Holloway. And you're right. You know, at beginning of the how I introduced it, I said it was competitive, but that was the kind of narrative coming out, and I think that was actually a result of how much the fans love Max Holloway and how they kind of haven't really seen him be outstruck or outpointed like that. It was kind of like a little bit jarring to kind of see that. This rematch is interesting, and as I said, I'm kind of anxious because I would have liked for Max to have taken another fight. Because of how the first fight looked, I don't know if he's had enough time to kind of make the changes and adjustments that he might need in order to make this fight a bit more competitive. He did start to go towards the body in the end because of the way Volkanovski was angling off and being defensively responsible. It made him very hard to hit as he was exiting and leaving the pocket. And obviously, as you said as well, the leg kicks were kind of making it difficult as well. So then Max changed it up and started going for the body instead, and that he had a bit more success doing that. So I wonder how much that's going to play into the game planning. But yeah, this is a fantastic matchup. Like I said, I just wish that perhaps Volkanovski was fighting someone like a Chan Sung Jung, and Max had a fight in between this to kind of grow and develop a bit more and kind of get that confidence back. Because as you said, he had a tough year last year. I mean, he had a fight. He had an absolute war with Poirier, where he, you know, fell short winning becoming a double champ, and then he lost his title after a successful defense against Frankie Edgar.
Yeah, I love the analysis of, and like you point out, in these situations where there's a rematch immediately after the first match, it very rarely does the result turn out any differently. I mentioned earlier, a fighter can get to 4-0, 5-0 in the UFC, and they fly under the radar. Volkanovski, his competition has increased every time. Mm-hmm. You know, he fought Chad Mendes, then he fought Aldo, then he fought Holloway. I mean, that is like progression up the rankings, right? And you know, once you've beaten Aldo and Holloway in that division, it's like there's not really anywhere else to go. So he's proven now. He's solidified. He's certified, right? 30. The questions about him are not the same. He's 30. The questions around him are not the same questions you're going to have around, you know, Piotr Jan, around strength of schedule. And I think just by his personality and his nature, he's not flashy. Maybe he's not well known to the majority of fans. He has flown under the radar, and as a result, he doesn't maybe get the recognition he deserves. So yeah, I think you should go ahead and make your pick on this one.
Okay, I'm gonna say that Volkanovski, he walks away with a unanimous decision, and it's even more convincing than the first time round. That's kind of my pick. I think his game plan and strategy was so thorough, and he really did his homework on Max. And I think that kind of showed in the fight. And I think it's going to be more of the same. And then I think this will lead to a move up in weight for Max Holloway up to lightweight, a bit more permanent one. That's kind of how I see. That's how I see it. That's my pick.
Very interesting stuff. And, I've gone back and forth over the result of this one, right? I've taken everything into consideration. And what I think we're going to see, Max Holloway reminding people of just how elite he is. I think he is going to make the changes in this fight, right? I think what's going to be different is that he's going to be more aggressive coming forward, right? He's going to back Volkanovski up, and which will mitigate those leg kicks, right? Obviously, it's very hard to throw a leg kick if you're moving backwards. Holloway may have been reluctant in that fight based on some of the damage he took in the Poirier fight. I don't know what it was causing him to be like that, but he didn't have the same sort of forward pressure. Maybe it was just a case of Volkanovski unsettling him early with the leg kicks. Anyway, this time out, I think Holloway is going to pressure more. I think he's going to start to ramp it up around round 2, round 3, as we've seen him do it in other fights. And I think he's going to walk away with a decision victory, regain that title. So Max Holloway by decision.
Nice, man. Okay.
All right, so we finished recording the episode, and we were pleased with how it turned out. We were really excited about the fights, and we got to break down the main event between Usman and Gilbert Burns. And then over the weekend, I guess we started hearing that Gilbert Burns had tested positive for coronavirus and had subsequently been removed from the card. And the rumor mill started churning, and Jorge Masvidal was sort of the first name on everybody's lips.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple of weeks back, when they were trying to make Usman versus Masvidal had said that, the UFC weren't paying him what he wanted, and therefore he wouldn't take the welterweight title fight. So the chances of the UFC coming to an agreement with Masvidal over this fight on short notice just didn't seem likely.
Right.
And so I was really anticipating the fight being scrapped, but all the parties concerned managed to come to an agreement that suited everybody. And lo and behold, Monday morning, it was confirmed that we were now going to have a new main event of Usman, the champion, versus Jorge Gamebred Masvidal. So what was going through your mind when you initially saw the fight being called off?
Yes, I mean, the same as you. I thought that I just thought they'd scrap the main event and then push Max and Volkanovski up to the main event instead. And yeah, like you said as well, the fact that Gamebred had kind of had this, ongoing dispute, quite vocal, quite public dispute ongoing with the UFC about pay. And you didn't really think, you thought they would just let him hang out to dry, really. And then hopefully he'll, sort of come back in a return fight, maybe against the winner of Usman Burns or perhaps a Colby Covington or something like that. But what ended up transpiring, like you said, is the MMA gods, like Burns and I was really looking forward to that matchup. Burns and Usman, it was a really interesting matchup because as we discussed, they were training partners, and they sort of negated each other in terms of the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu. The MMA gods have smiled down on us, and they replaced probably a better matchup, a more exciting matchup, I guess, in Jorge Masvidal. And Gamebred, true to his name, steps in on 6 days' notice to fight your champion. And equally, it's worth giving respect as well. The fact that Usman has taken this challenge as well, taken a fight with Gamebred as well on 6 days' notice, that's worthy of big respect as well.
Absolutely, man. It takes a lot to step up on short notice. He has the title of the BMF, the baddest motherfucker in the UFC.
Yeah.
And this really is a bad motherfucker move, right? Stepping up on short notice is something that we give fighters a lot of credit for. But in such a high profile spot, your first title shot, it really is a different level of self-belief and opportunism.
Because he could lose it. He had a bunch of leverage, really. He had the baddest motherfucker belt. He's on this 3-fight win streak where he's been absolutely blasting fools. He's got the win from Till. He had the win from over Askren, and lastly, just the win, finishing Nate Diaz. And he was riding high, and he had a lot of leverage. And to step on and fight the champion on such short notice. And most would agree, I think, most critics would agree that, Usman is quite a bad matchup. I know we're going to get into the breakdown, but Usman is a bad matchup for Masvidal. If past his prologue, he's kind of struggled against strong wrestlers or grapplers. So mad respect to both fighters for giving the fans what's set to be an amazing fight.
Absolutely. And I mean, so for context, this is Jorge Masvidal's 49th professional fight, right? So to be attaining his first title shot at this late in his career, it really speaks to his longevity and, you know, the grind that he's put into the sport.
Yeah.
And it really would be the greatest story in the history of the sport, in my opinion, if he could somehow walk away from Yas Island, Abu Dhabi, as the welterweight champion under these circumstances.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, this would be a fantastic feat. Like you said, quite rightly, he's been in the game for a long time. He was fighting under the banner, the sort of the street fights under Kimbo Slice. May rest in peace. And he's had a lot of iterations throughout his career. He's kind of had he was a split decision king for a while. Well, not the king, but he lost a lot of split decision. And he had a lot of losses, and he was kind of going through this weird stint. And then he's had a lot of these streaks where he's absolutely had glimmers of title or championship potential, basically. And you wonder, have the stars aligned, and can he capture that belt this Saturday?
It really would be something special. He's one of those characters, right? He's a fans fighter, right? And for the longest time, he was the guy that if you really knew the sport, you were a fan of him. But just what he's done the last year has really catapulted him to be one of the biggest stars, and arguably the biggest active star in the sport, right? Because in the absence of Conor, who is there that sort of has transcended in the last year, like Masvidal? I don't think there's anybody.
He would only be rivaled by, Nate Diaz was inactive, and then he beat Nate. So yeah, I think he's definitely cemented himself as a hot commodity in the UFC.
So we can agree this is a big G move for Masvidal, and like you said, similarly, it's a big undertaking for Usman to take, because he's also taking the fight on short notice. So props to both guys. So let's get into the matter at hand, and let's talk about how we see this fight playing out. Maybe Usman was not planning on utilizing his wrestling much against Gilbert Burns' abilities on the ground. So do you think this new matchup changes that for Usman?
I do think so. Yeah, I think he'd be best served to kind of do what Kamaru Usman does best, and that's wrestle boxing style. It's pressure against the fence, and kind of, I guess you could call it spamming, because Jorge Masvidal has really good wrestling defense. He actually has very good takedown defense, but what ends up happening is his striking game can kind of be stifled when he comes across good grapplers or wrestlers that are able to kind of keep on doing lots of attempts, keep on trying to take him down. And we saw that in the Maya fight. We've seen that in other fights as well that he's had. He hasn't been able to achieve success. You would think that Usman is going to try and lean on his a bit more on his wrestling, at least compared to what he did in his last fight with Covington.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, for Masvidal, one of the tools that he's gone to repeatedly throughout his career, and it was really on display in the Nate Diaz fight, was that body kick, right? And he's a vicious body kicker, and that is really what laid the foundations in the Nate Diaz fight to end the fight the way it did. In mixed martial arts, the threat of takedowns is so prevalent with the body kick that if you're concerned about being taken down, it's not a kick that you'll go to often. And I wonder if Usman's wrestling ability is going to prevent Masvidal from throwing that kick and therefore stifling one of his most effective weapons. What's
interesting to me is that if you watch Jorge Masvidal, he gets labeled as kind of a brawler because of his background. He where he came from in terms of the street fights under Kimbo Slice, and he's always been kind of like a cool customer, but he's been kind of painted with a bit of a brawler, I guess, style. What he's really, really good at, and we've seen that in his last 3 fights, is he's been able to kind of set up his opponents very well, and figure out a way, particularly in his last 3, how to finish the fight as well. So do it with some sort of finality. I wonder, because he was so vocal about fighting Usman, and early on, he seemed very confident. The rest of the world kind of thought, "Well, this is a terrible matchup. Why take the fight with Usman? Like, that just doesn't make sense. You should be fighting McGregor. That's the bigger payday." But he did sort of talk a little bit about fighting McGregor, but he was very keen on getting that Kamaru Usman fight. So I do wonder if there's something he sees there, an opening or something. The Ben Askren knee, easily KO of the year, but that was all set up. And he'd been practicing that KO, that finish, that sequence, all throughout camp. It's something that he saw early on. So I wonder if there's something that he sees in Usman's game that he can exploit and maybe even potentially get a finish. That's something that that's interesting to me and something to watch out for, I think.
Sure, Masvidal and his team have extensively workshopped a plan to take on Usman. Just taking a fight on such short notice when you're cutting 20 pounds in a matter of 6 days, the effect that's going to have on Masvidal, I'm also concerned about, because while he's a veteran who, in my recollection, has never missed weight, and especially now he's at welterweight, coming up from 155, he's not prone to missing weight. He's not a huge 170er, but I still feel like the travel and the weight cut might be a detriment to Masvidal's preparation. Of course, 6 days is never going to be ideal. But then conversely, you could hear people say, or you could understand the viewpoint that being on short notice actually means that you don't get a chance to overthink it, and you're just going to go in there and sort of fight on instinct, which somebody like Masvidal, with his extensive experience, like I said, 48 professional fights, maybe just what he needs, right? Just go in there and do what he's been doing his whole life.
Usman has 17 fights in total? Is it something correct? Something like that?
It's around there.
Around there. He's a lesser of experience. Like you said, this will be Jorge Masvidal's nearly 50th fight in mixed martial arts. And he's God knows how many fights he's had on the streets. He's a cool customer. He knows what he's doing. He figures out his opponent in the cage. I wonder, Kamaru Usman, I know he's the champion. He's been able to do it relatively early in his career. I wonder, who serves the short turnaround and change of opponent? From what you're saying, I think you're kind of agreeing with me in that I think this serves Jorge Masvidal a bit better. Granted, he hasn't had the training camp like Usman has, but in terms of game planning and figure out your opponent in the cage, I think Jorge has the upper hand there. Being
short notice, that does serve Masvidal more than it would Usman. I think Usman's getting a completely different fighter now, and he's going to have to fight a different fight than what he's been preparing for. Yeah, that's going to be a very interesting dynamic, seeing the level of preparation that each fighter can bring into it. But yeah, absolutely. If it's a case of instinctive fighting and go into what you already know, then I there's no doubt in my mind that Masvidal has the upper hand as the vastly more experienced of the two men. All right, so we pride ourselves over here at 4Yogz of making a very well-informed, thought-out picks. We usually spend a lot of time researching and trying to come up with the best pick possible. With this fight, we haven't had a lot of opportunity to really sit down and break down the technical intricacies of it. Maybe I am getting swept up in a bit of the emotive situation around Jorge Masvidal getting called up last minute, and everything he's done in his career and the significance of it. I think back to UFC 196 when Nate Diaz got called in short notice to fight McGregor on 11 days notice, and he went in and secured that famous victory. And these are the things that we love. I think of Michael Bisping going against Luke Rockhold. Yeah,
that's another crazy one, isn't it? Yeah,
at UFC 199 and winning his the middleweight championship. And they're the great stories. I mean, they're the Rocky stories. They're the underdog coming in and overcoming the odds to secure the victory that no one thought possible. With that being said, Masvidal finds himself in a similar situation. I think this is going to bring the dog out in Masvidal. I think he knows that this might be his last, his one and only chance at a UFC championship, which I think, given the division and given where he is in his career, it's very possible it could be. And I think he knows that this is his opportunity to take. I'm expecting him to put it all on the line in the first couple of rounds and look to stop Kamaru Usman because I don't think his chances are going to improve as the fight goes on. I think Jorge Masvidal is going to beat Kamaru Usman.
Yeah,
I think he's going to beat him by TKO in the second round.
Ooh, okay.
I expect dirty elbows on the inside when Usman tries to clinch him against the cage. I think we're going to see all of the street Jesus magic come out on this one. So I'm going out there. I know he's a 3-1 underdog, but I'm going for Jorge Masvidal by second round TKO.
No, I guess that just leaves me, doesn't it? So I would love it. I would love, just like you. I feel I was when this first was announced. I was kind of swept up in the emotion, and I'm a massive Jorge Masvidal fan. I think he's absolutely he's one of the very few highly instinctual fighters. Like he just has that. He's gamebred. He has that innate ability. He has that doggedness, which is why I think definitely in these types of circumstances, I think he'd be an excellent pick. However, just in the spirit of competition, to make it a bit more exciting, I think that Kamaru Usman He's going to, again, show why he's a problem in the 170 division. He'll have some difficulty early on, but I'm going to say, like, as the rounds progress, Kamaru Usman's going to be able to kind of have his way a little bit in terms of the wrestling and being able to mix it up with Jorge and get him down. Obviously, I don't know what Jorge's schedule has been like in terms of training and cardio and conditioning, but I think that's going to play a factor. Yeah, I think Kamaru Usman is probably going to be able to find a way to mix in his wrestling, making Masvidal think about his hands a little bit and then mix it in and, try and spam him with wrestling attacks and ultimately control him on the floor. It's not going to be an easy test by any stretch, but I'm going to say Kamaru Usman by decision.
I can't argue with your logic on that one, right? Given the matchup. And I mean, looking at Usman's record, he's gone 5 rounds in his last 4 fights. He's great over 5 rounds. He doesn't run out of steam and he keeps going. So I think given the short notice nature of this fight, it definitely makes sense for that pick. Like I said, for me, I think Masvidal, being opportunist that he is, he's going to go out there and unload hell on Usman for the first 10 minutes and try and get him out of there.
Yeah, I'm super excited, man. In my heart of hearts, would I like to see Jorge win and then set up a potential matchup with Covington or, someone else like a McGregor? Yeah, that sounds awesome to me. I need to try and think about this logically. I do think Usman's going to win, but like you said, I guess we're going to have to wait and find out.
All right, everyone. So look, like I said, we had to do this on the spur of the moment once we found out the fight was called off. So any references earlier in the episode to Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, please discredit those conversations. We hope you're happy with the new main event because we definitely are. All right, everyone. Until next time, this has been 4 Yogz. I've been Lewis.
And I've been Souph.
Till next time.
Keep your hands up.